the only remaining founder of the Canadian Log Builders Association, I don't expect I'll get much contradiction with my memory of those first couple of years. But we quickly evolved into the Canadian American Association and then to today's name, the International Log Builders Association. For the purposes of this talk, I will use the present name and the abbreviation ILBA. I had acquired my passion for log building as a kid growing up in the Yukon in the 1950s, where I often stumbled across trappers and prospectors' cabins while tending my trap line. In the fall of 1968, I became colleagues with two guys who were having their log houses built by two different old boys trained in Europe. I visited their sites and immediately fell in love. On one of the sites, I met a Swede Finn by the name of Uno Beck, and he gave me a rough-hewn apprenticeship in hand-scribed long log construction, a technique I had never seen before or even heard of. In fact, most people hadn't heard of it back in those days. We worked together, hand logging, shake bolt harvesting, roofing, and house building. And so when the time came to build my own first house in Langley, British Columbia, it naturally had to be logs. There was so much interest in log building in those waning hippie back to the land days that I quit my day job as a high school teacher and established myself as a professional log builder. Visiting my brother in the interior of BC, I met a friend of his who was intrigued by my newfound career and asked me if I had read the book Building with Logs by B. Allen Mackey. I had never heard of Mackey, but I dropped into a local bookstore and found a copy of his how-to book. The book reinforced much of what I had learned at the feet of old Beck, as well as some of my own development on the job working alone. I began a correspondence with Mary Mackey, and this led to a brief visit in 1974 with the Mackeys at the site of the B. Allen Mackey School of Log Building, about 45 minutes west of Prince George, which is in British Columbia. I took one of my laborers, Fergus O'Connor, with me. At the time, Allen was teaching log building for the local college and had engaged Ed Campbell and Art Long to be the instructors of this newly established log building school. A current student, Bernie Legault, was visiting one evening, and that is the evening it all started. As us five men and Mary Mackey were sitting around the blazing fire of the fieldstone fireplace in the Mackey log house, Mary suddenly said, "We need to establish a professional association of log builders." We thought this was a great idea, even though there were probably only about a dozen builders in all of Canada known to us. We toasted this new association with generous libations of Canadian Club whiskey in Mary's Old Country Roses Royal Dalton teacups. We elected Ed Campbell as our first president and appointed Bernie Legault as our first secretary, and even rented office space in Prince George from whence Bernie could process application forms. And thus we became the founding fathers and one mother of the first Log Builders Building Association. Mary Mackey, Alan Mackey, Ed Campbell, Vic Janzen, myself, Art Long, Fergus O'Connor, and Bernie Legault. Today in 2020, we have lost Mary and Alan and Art and Fergus. I remain the only somewhat active member of the fraternity. Our first AGM took place at the log building school, and our second and third ones took place on my farm in Langley and again in Columbia Valley. To give you a concept of the evolution of the ILBA, let me tell you about convention site, accommodation, and dining. Hosting the second AGM at my farm, I had my wife Claudia and my mother-in-law make chicken borscht out of a half dozen spent laying hens we had in stock. The gang raved about the meal. I think it was in the year 2000 we gathered at the Chateau Montebello in Quebec, the largest log building in the world. Montebello was a landmark. We had dreamt this day would come, but never really expected it to. The years have been kind. The association continues to serve its members worldwide. We have grown from the seed of 6 people to a membership high at one time of 537.